Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya News headquarters. These are our top stories. The UN warns of dramatic consequences as tension mounts in northeast Syria between the Kurds and Turkish-backed groups. In a striking admission, Israel breaks its silence on the assassination of Hamas leader Haniyeh and vows the Houthis will face a similar fate. The CEO murder suspect Luigi is not backing down. He pleads not guilty in court as he faces a possible death penalty or a maximum sentence of life in prison without parole. To our top story now, fighting has broken out in northern Syria between the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces and the Turkish-backed SNA. Yesterday, the SDF said it had launched a counter-offensive around Manbij and the Tishreen Dam. The UN Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, has spoken out about the escalating hostilities. He said the tensions between Kurdish-led authorities and Turkish-backed groups must be resolved politically or risk dramatic consequences for all of Syria. Meanwhile, we've also heard from the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who says the PKK and the YPG in Syria will either dissolve themselves or ultimately be destroyed. Erdogan also emphasized that he would respect Syria's territorial integrity, adding that the group's presence along the country's border is a red line for Turkey. For more on this, I'm joined by Murat Aslan, Associate Professor of International Politics at Hasan Kuljon University and Senior Researcher at SETA. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. First of all, reports suggest there are ongoing counter-offensive launched by the US-backed SDF, as we did mention earlier. What is the latest situation on the ground around Manbij?
Well, Manbij is very critical at the west of Euphrates River, as you may know. It's a foothold maybe to expand in the way to Afrin or Laskiya. It was 2016, Turkey prevented it. But today, there was an agreement between the Syrian National Forces and PKK that Manbij should be evacuated, and they did it. And after a 4-day ceasefire, now they started a counter-offensive. I don't know why, but it's to capture Manbij, though. Manbij is a huge land. Once you evacuate it, it's very hard to achieve such a goal. On the other hand, the Turkish and Syrian national armies, ultimate goal is to eradicate PKK or at least push them to transform themselves, which is really free from the PKK influence, which is based in Iraq, but, pure Syrian Kurdish force or entity. On the other hand, there are a lot of impediments for this, and we can discuss.
Turkey has moved a lot of military assets in and around northern Syria. Erdogan has called on the YPG group to dissolve or face destruction, as I mentioned earlier. What exactly is he preparing for?
Well, the first priority, I believe, is to have Syrian National Army under the authority of the Damascus-based government, because they are now restructuring their defense forces, as you may know, and, just push PKK away from the Turkish borders. And also, Turkey is well aware of the fragility, especially in Raqqa, Haseki, and Deir ez-Zor. Why? Because publics in these cities started uprisings across the streets protesting PKK. If this attempt fails, I think Turkey will push hard and maybe start a military operations. But Foreign Minister Fidan has proposed a 3-phase plan, especially to Syrian Democratic Forces, which is actually PKK right now, which was to expel the PKK members from the body at the east of Euphrates River first, and then transform themselves and clearing terrorist cells, at the eastern Euphrates River.
Negotiations are ongoing in the background between the US and Turkey. Would the Turkish government be willing to accept any deal that leaves the SDF or YPG in control of northeastern Syria?
Well, Republicans, Trump will have the power as of January 20th. And it's a turning point because it was 2 times last year Trump announced that the United States has nothing to do in Syria. And it was yesterday, the consultant to Trump, Waltz, repeated the same argument. That means Turkey is expecting a withdrawal of the U.S. forces. Well, it's something new, maybe. On the other hand, that it was a fact maybe 4 or 5 years ago because Trump ordered the same thing. But it was James Jeffries, special representative to Syria of the United States, pushed a lot, not to stop this move. And today we are expecting a withdrawal of the U.S. forces as Turkish community. Then there may be a military operation. On the other hand, Turkey is very reluctant to start it before the withdrawal of the U.S. forces because Turkey does not want to clash with the U.S. That's a clear fact.
But what is going to happen to SDF in this region if we do see these US forces withdraw, as you have said? Is that not going to cause unrest?
Well, I don't think so, because SDF is currently collapsing. Why? The armed groups in Deir ez-Zor, the Arab tribes with Sunni descent, they quit from the SDF. I mean, now they are obeying the rules of Damascus-based government, transition government. Second thing, if PKK commands the overall structure over there, their essential, stake is what Daesh members who are kept in the prisons. And the number of them is 8,000 people. Well, Turkey and Damascus-based government clearly proposed to the United States and the Western community that it must be the Damascus government in charge with such prisons. And there must be a clear justice process because we can't experience Guantanamo another time. In this sense, I believe the SDF will lose its credibility, first in the eyes of the Arab tribes, the east of Euphrates River, and second thing, once Syrian National Army or Turkish army starts a military operation, it will be maybe a medium-term quarrel, but it will marginalize PKK members because SDF will collapse.
Murat Aslan, Associate Professor of International Politics at Hasan Kalju University. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Earlier, the Manbij Military Council linked to the SDF released aerial photos showing the withdrawal of pro-Turkish fighters near Tishreen Dam and surrounding villages. Joining me now to discuss the SDF Counter Offensive is Vladimir van Wilgenburg, a journalist and author of 2 books on the Syrian Kurds. Vladimir, thank you so much for joining us. I was just speaking to a Turkish professor there before you who suggested the FDS haven't gained much from this counter-offensive. What is your assessment of the situation?
Well, the last few days there have been heavy fighting. The Syrian Democratic Forces, they have pushed back Turkish-backed groups from some villages around Tishreen until the small town of Abu Qalqal. So they have benefited actually from the weather because not today, but the days before it was quite misty. So they have been benefiting from the fact that the SNA, they had lack of Turkish aerial support. So they have been pushed back a little bit. And also they have been having fighting on other fronts. And also Turkey has been carrying out drone strikes on SDF positions. But there was also a lot of rumors that the SDF entered Manbij, but that's not true. But they have captured some villages close to Tishreen Dam.
So it's not true that they've entered Manbij, as you say? Is that not happening?
No, they are still like a few kilometers away from Manbij, around 12 kilometers. But there's still heavy fighting in the area. And before this area is close to the dam, they were controlled by the Syrian National Army, but they have been pushed back from some of these villages close to Tishreen Dam.
The SDF launched this counter-offensive as negotiations with Turkey do remain ongoing. And you joined me recently and we spoke about what a possible deal would look like. What's the hold-up at the moment?
You mean the deal with America or a deal with Damascus?
Well, a deal to have peace in the region or to reach some sort of ongoing ceasefire, so a deal with Damascus.
Well, the Syrian Democratic Forces, they're saying they're willing even to disarm if there's any form of recognition of Kurdish rights in Syria. They want to have a decentralized Syria where rights of minorities such as the Kurds and the Druze and also Christians are respected. So they want to have a form of decentralization, some form of autonomy for the Kurdish population also. So we have to see if these negotiations will happen in the future, because you saw that today there was a meeting between the de facto leader of Syria with armed factions that they say basically that no armed factions are allowed to have weapons. So we have to see how this is going to work. But in the past, the SDF had negotiations with the groups led by Ahmed al-Shara, by the HTS in Aleppo. And so far, there have been no fighting between the HTS and SDF forces in Aleppo or other areas.
ISIS remains a key concern for global and regional security, Vladimir. Around 50,000 members remain in prison in SDF-controlled areas. The new administration have offered to relieve them of their duty. Is this even possible?
Well, I mean, there's not only prisons, there's also several IDP camps where there are like 50,000 like ISIS families, basically. And then you have prisoners from with different nationalities from foreign countries, etc. So, I mean, it's possible, I mean, if there would be an agreement between the SDF and the new administration in Damascus to hand over those prisons to Damascus, but there have to be some form of bigger deal on what to do with northern Syria. I mean, in general, there's a lot of countries that are actually afraid that if Turkey and Turkish-backed groups attack the SDF, those prisoners could escape. Because you saw that, for instance, in Deir ez-Zor, after the regime withdrawal, that a lot of prisoners, they escaped the prison, but among of them are like civilians that were like basically wanted by the regime, that were oppressed by the regime. But there's also different kind of people among them. Basically, all of them were released. So there's also a lot of Western countries, they're afraid if Turkey or the Turkish-backed groups will attack, that those prisoners could escape.
Kurds make up around 3% of the country's population, but now control between 30 and 40% of Syria's internationally recognized territory, including historically Arab majority areas. Do you think this is actually sustainable?
Well, I mean, as a former Turkish analyst, the Turkish analysts that were talking before, the SDF until now is not collapsing. The reason for that is that because 60% of the SDF, they are Arabs. So it's a Kurdish-led force, but it's maintaining other components like Christians and Arabs. So this coalition was created basically to fight ISIS with US support. So it's a multi-ethnic coalition. And also, if you look to the administration that is built, it's not like a Kurdish administration. There's Arabs in it, people from Raqqa, from Deir ez-Zor and other areas. So it's not really, it's reflective of the demography of northeast Syria. But we have to see in the future negotiations how it can work if this administration can stay in power in those areas, or they're going to find a different method. Because there's also possible, for instance, that the Kurdish-led administration will, for instance, give the new authorities in Damascus control over things like the airport and oil and gas resources, but that locally they can still have some form of local security forces under their control. But we have to see how it's going to work if this new administration will accept some form of decentralization, because not only Kurds demand this, but also, for instance, Christians and Druze.
Vladimir van Wilgenburg, journalist and author of 2 books on the Syrian Kurds. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. At least a dozen people have been killed and 4 injured following an explosion in northwest Turkey. Footage from the scene shows a massive fireball erupt from the ammunition and explosives factory, followed by plumes of dark smoke. According to the Turkish Interior Minister, sabotage has been ruled out and the cause of the accident does remain unknown. Now, former US President Bill Clinton has been hospitalized after developing a fever. The 78-year-old was admitted to MedStar Georgetown University Hospital in Washington for, quote, testing and observation. The former US President's Deputy Chief of Staff saying he is, quote, in good spirits. And many residents in Victoria evacuated as bushfires rage in the southeast Australian region. Firefighters trying to contain the blaze and residents given but a few hours to collect their belongings across the country. A string of fire warnings and severe heat forecast just a day before Christmas. In Russia, scientists have found the remains of a 50,000-year-old baby mammoth in Serbia. It has earned the title of the world's best preserved mammoth carcass, named Yana, found in permafrost. The remains weigh over 100 kilograms and is 4 foot tall. Now, the man accused of fatally gunning down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in New York pleaded not guilty, even though the state criminal courthouse revealed handwritten pages that expressed hostility towards the health insurance industry and its wealthy executives. Luigi Mangione faces 11 state charges, including murder and terrorism. If convicted, he faces life imprisonment without parole. Meanwhile, in the federal case, he could face the death penalty. Mangione is expected to appear in court on the 21st of February. Now, social media has labelled Luigi Mangione as a hot assassin. His lawyer says the high publicity could impact the final judgment by the court.
He's a young man, and he is being treated like a human ping pong ball between 2 warring jurisdictions here. These federal and state prosecutors are coordinating with one another, but at the expense of him. They have conflicting theories in their indictments, and they are literally treating him like he is like some sort of political fodder, like some sort of spectacle. He was on display for everyone to see in the biggest staged perp walk I've ever seen in my career. Your Honor, I'm very concerned about my client's right to a fair trial in this case. He's being prejudiced by some statements that are being made by government officials. Like every other defendant, he is entitled to a presumption of innocence. But unfortunately, the way this has been handled so far, his rights are being violated.
Luigi Mangione is escorted into court on Monday. He maintains his innocence despite what prosecutors say is a bulk of evidence suggesting he committed the crime. They point to a notebook found in his possession in which entries express hostility towards the healthcare insurance industry and wealthy executives in particular.
Hi, I'm Brian Thompson.
One of whom was billionaire Brian Thompson, who headed the US's largest health insurance company. But Mangione's lawyer believes her client is being unfairly treated, arguing he's just a young man handled like a human ping pong ball, blasting this high-profile Hollywood-style manner in which he was paraded in front of cameras during his perp walk. That call for sympathy for the 26-year-old is being heeded. As Mangione entered court, he was met with a chorus of protesters demanding his freedom.
I think it's awful that someone lost their life, but at the same time, I think that this is a sign that something needs to change. You know,
I myself, my family have financial problems and stuff. My mom has problems with getting health insurance and stuff, so it does kind of touch me personally.
A recent survey showed that 41% of young people stateside believe that Brian Thompson's murder was justified, with Mangione widely hailed as a folk hero online for allegedly attacking profit-driven corporate America. Social media is awash with jokes over the killing, as is mainstream TV.
Luigi Mangione dropped...
This is NBC's comedy programme Saturday Night Live. The very mention of Mangione's name greeted with applause amongst audience members. That sort of reaction has been condemned by elected officials.
I want to send a very clear and loud message that this act of terrorism and the violence that stems from it is something that would not be tolerated.
Yet this case is serving as a sign of a country disunited. A debate is bubbling over not just a suspect, but a system. Benji Haya, Al Arabiya News.
Now, for the first time, Israel has claimed responsibility for killing Ismail Haniyeh, the former Hamas leader. That's after Defense Minister Israel Katz acknowledged that Israel was behind the assassination of Haniyeh, who was staying at a guest house in Tehran to attend the inauguration of Iran's president.
We will strike hard at the Houthis and decapitate their leadership, just as we did with Haniyeh, Sinwar, and Nasrallah in Tehran, Gaza, and Lebanon. We will do so in Hudaydah and Sana'a. Anyone who raises a hand against Israel will have his hand cut off, and the long arm of the IDF will strike him and hold him accountable.
In Israel's view, the Houthis will face consequences similar to those experienced by other pro-Iranian factions. Speaking to the Knesset, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu affirmed this, stating that he had ordered the Israeli army to carry out attacks against Houthi targets. He added Israel will not turn a blind eye to Iran and will prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
We do not turn a blind eye to Iran or its desire to destroy us. We will prevent it from possessing a nuclear weapon. We assess all the dangers and threats, and I, along with Defense Minister Katz, have directed the army to destroy Houthi targets and infrastructure in Yemen.
Regarding the Gaza truce, Netanyahu declined to provide the Knesset with details of prisoner swap talks, stating that progress has been made but cannot be disclosed.
I cannot tell you everything we are doing. We are taking important steps regarding the hostages. There has been some progress in the hostage deal talks for three main reasons. First, Yahya Sinwar is no longer with us. Second, Hamas has lost hope that Iran and Hezbollah will come to its aid. And third, Hamas is receiving blows and is under constant military pressure. So there is progress, but I do not know how long it will take. I cannot disclose details.
For more on this, I'm joined by Yossi Mansharof, an expert on Iran and Iranian proxies at the Misgav Institute for National Security. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Israel has broken its silence on the assassination of the Hamas leader. Why now?
Good evening. I think that its main idea is to deter Iran from promoting an attack against Israel for the recent crucial attack that Israel has done against Iran for the first time in the history of the Iranian regime. The regime is attacked in different 20 points, including one nuclear facility and so many military facilities. So now the main goal of Israel is to deter Iran, not to carry out its coming attack. They promised so many times to launch the attack, and Israel is doing its best to deter Khamenei and the leadership of the security and political system in Tehran.
Was the announcement from Israel Katz a chance for Israel to reveal its broader regional strategy of dismantling threats from Iranian proxies? Do you think that's what he was doing?
Until now, I think we see a major success of Israel. In Gaza, Hamas is almost eliminated. In Lebanon, we see Hezbollah, which suffered a major blow. We see the resistance axis, which is very weak now after the dismissal of Assad. And only yesterday, we heard about the decision of the Iraqi Shiite militias to suspend the attacks against Israel. So I think that Khamenei and the leadership in Tehran feel this blow, and now they should recalculate their decisions against Israel.
What can
only the Yemenite arena?
Sorry,
only the Yemenite arena is still so extensively operating against Israel.
What can Iran do to protect and support the Houthis now? As you say, they have lost Assad in Syria. Hezbollah remains heavily weakened. What's next?
I think that the main goal of Israel is now to promote a joint strategy with the incoming Trump administration in order to push the resistance axis led by Iran as much as possible back. Iran, since the Islamic Revolution, established a regional order. We saw it by so many proxies that Iran established and nurtured in Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, in Syria, even in Saudi Arabia during the 80s, it was called Hezbollah Hijaz. In Yemen, in Bahrain, the main problem of the region is Iran, and now Israel should target the Houthis until that Trump will be sworn, and then to promote a joint coalition led by Iran and led by America, and with the support and the participation of regional Sunni countries such as Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, and others, in order to push Iran back. The 7 October massacre, we saw the disaster result of this attack. It was backed by Iran, and Israel cannot longer tolerate any such a major threat by Iran or is...
Yossi Mansar, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you. Now for some of the top business news. Eric Lombard, the head of the state-backed financial group Caisse de Dépôt, has been named the new French finance minister. The French Prime Minister's pick will handle the country's budget from 2025. Dépôt takes over from Antoine Armand. Now, Volkswagen shares were down almost 3% in early trading today, with analysts citing uncertainty about the carmaker's cost-cutting deal with the unions. Last week, VW announced sweeping changes to its German operators, with more than 35,000 future job cuts. As part of the deal between the automaker and unions representing workers, there would be no immediate site closures or layoffs. On to sports news now. Arsenal forward Bukayo Saka will be out for several weeks after suffering a hamstring injury during Saturday's Premier League win at Crystal Palace. Saka will miss this coming Friday's league game against Ipswich Town at Emirates. Saka has recorded 5 goals and 10 assists in the league this season, helping Arsenal to 3rd place in the standings. Staying with football news, Manchester United manager Ruben Amorim has questioned the choices of those close to forward Marcus Rashford, whose time at Old Trafford could be coming to an end. The 27-year-old England international sat out at a third straight game on Sunday as United did lose to Bournemouth. Rashford was also left out of the squad for the derby win at Manchester City earlier this month and Thursday's League Cup quarter-final defeat by Tottenham. Tensions between Rashford and the club increased following an interview in which Rashford acknowledged he was ready for a new challenge. Now, two-time Grand Slam doubles champion Max Purcell has been provisionally suspended after admitting a breach of anti-doping rules. Purcell, whose major titles came at Wimbledon in 2022 and this year's US Open, said he had unknowingly received an intravenous infusion of vitamins, which was above the 100 ml limit allowed by the World Anti-Doping Agency. He reported the issue to the International Tennis Integrity Agency after he received his medical records, and that was last week. A reminder of our top stories. The UN warns of dramatic consequences as tension mounts in northeast Syria between the Kurds and the Turkish-backed groups. Now, in a striking admission, Israel breaks its silence on the assassination of Hamas leader Haniyeh and vows the Houthis will face a similar fate. The CEO murder suspect, Luigi Mangione, is not backing down. He pleads not guilty in court as he faces a possible death penalty or a maximum sentence of life in prison without parole. And that's all for us on W News. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you all have a really lovely Christmas Eve. Riz Khan and Hadley Gamble are coming up next, and don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. Good night.